The big problem is that many people do not see the full picture and make very hasty conclusions, which can lead to more tragic consequences. A man found his wife in a very compromising position in a hotel room. His conclusion was that she cheated on him. Michael admired Leslie, looking down at her. She looked just as beautiful, if not more so, than the day they first met. They spent 18 wonderful years together, raising 2 wonderful girls. What could be better? But what they had just achieved exceeded all expectations. Since the girls had gone to visit their grandparents for the weekend, they could indulge in games that they usually did not risk being caught off guard. They felt like one. They believed they were kindred spirits. Their friends were jealous of their relationship. They never looked at anyone else. Both were sociable, happy, and pleasant to talk to. This continued until the events of Wednesday, when everything fell apart. Leslie was vaguely aware that she was lying on a bed in an unfamiliar room. She felt like she was in a fog, unable to think clearly. The surroundings seemed blurry and indistinct, as if the world was out of focus. It was hard to breathe. She had no idea where she was or who she was with. She tried to move and speak, but found she couldn't do it. She was trying to break free from her bonds. Someone was kissing her. Who was it? It was painful and devoid of any tenderness. She felt herself slipping away. The next time she came to, she couldn't tell how much time had passed. Trying to realize her position, she felt the presence of a man nearby. Trying to focus her eyes, she couldn't identify him, although she felt something strangely familiar. The man was standing next to her head. There were familiar sounds, but she couldn't remember where they came from. Then something warm touched her face. The man stated, "You're going to marry me." He left, and she thought she heard the door open. A few moments or minutes later, the time was unclear, she heard a voice calling her name, which suddenly stopped. She lost consciousness again. I spent a restless night filled with worry. Leslie hadn't returned from work and hadn't communicated in any way. No calls, texts, not even a WhatsApp message. I tried calling repeatedly, but there was no response. This was completely out of character for her, something unprecedented. I reached out to her friends, but none of them had any information, or so they claimed. Our daughters, Lean and Audrey, were also anxious. This wasn't like their mom. The police weren't involved yet. Around 7:45 the next morning, I received a text saying she had a surprise for me in room 5009 at the Cornhill Hotel. After dropping off the kids at school, I felt a wave of relief, knowing they were safe amidst what was unfolding. As I stepped out of the elevator, I caught a glimpse of a man exiting a room near where 5009 should have been. He didn't glance my way, and I didn't see his face to identify him. I wished I had. He walked briskly towards the stairwell away from me. When I reached room 5009, the door was slightly open. He had tampered with the latch so it wouldn't shut properly. I remember feeling my heart race as I realized he had been inside Leslie's room. Why? When I opened the door, I was shocked to the core. I almost fainted right there. I barely took a step into that horrible room. Leslie was lying on the bed completely unaware of my presence. Her posture indicated that she was completely out of her mind, probably because she had drunk more than I had ever seen her drink before. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that her face was covered in white liquid, a stark contrast to how she looked yesterday when she left the house. I screamed, "Leslie!" but my voice stuck in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to go to her, to the woman I loved. Instead, I took some photos, perhaps for use in our divorce proceedings, if she decided to challenge it. I was devastated. Until that moment, I had never really realized the depth of that word. I was filled with anger. I wanted to lash out at her for what she had done to me. But then thoughts of our children intervened. Rationality prevailed. I couldn't bring myself to take actions that would leave our children without parents. After returning home, I found that I couldn't work. It took me some time to think about my next steps. First, I wanted the woman to know that I was aware of her actions. I uploaded the photos I took, and added a message. Leslie, I've been worried about you all night, only to find out that you were in a hotel room with someone else. I never wanted to witness what I saw, you leaving with a man completely out of your mind. It was quite unpleasant to see it. I'll never understand why you invited me as a surprise. It was the cruelest thing you've ever done. You have completely destroyed my love for you. I don't want to hear your voice, see your lying eyes, or even catch a glimpse of you. You never thought about how it would affect our daughters. I'll have to explain it to them when they get back from school. How could you? I hope that you will live a miserable life for the rest of your days. Don't bother coming home. Secondly, I informed both pairs of grandparents about it. Leslie's parents couldn't believe it until I showed them the photos. Looking back, I realized that it was cruel, but my anger overshadowed any respect for the feelings of others. Thirdly, the divorce. I had a conversation with David, our friend and family solicitor. He was stunned when I shared the news with him. He later mentioned that it was the tone of my voice that convinced him the pain was unmistakable. He said he would have bet his life that Leslie would never betray me. He advised taking a few days to calm down before starting the process. It wouldn't happen overnight, and an angry petition could backfire. I reluctantly followed his advice. Fourth, I canceled all joint credit and cash cards. Following David's advice, I moved some, but not all, of the money into a new account with instructions not to touch it in the meantime. I spent some time figuring out what to tell the girls when they came home from school. It was as bad as I had anticipated. 2 distressed girls. Once I had settled that, I had nothing to keep my mind occupied. It kept replaying that scene. My world had crumbled. When I thought about myself and the other woman, I couldn't see through the tears. My life changed, and so did I. I couldn't see through the tears. My life changed, and so did I. I woke up around 11, judging by the clock in the room. I felt completely drained, which was not normal. When I looked in the mirror, I noticed a white dried substance on my face. What happened? I love Michael with all my heart. We're soulmates, and I would never betray him. Memories flooded back to me. Michael was there. He saw me. I collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down my face, and sobs shook my body. I've never felt so devastated. What have I done? I vaguely remembered the man's face, but who was he? After taking a shower and getting dressed, I still felt terrible. When I checked my phone, it only got worse. Michael sent me the photos he took. His angry words pierced my soul. He never wanted to see me again. I've been labeled a girl of easy virtue. I left the hotel and couldn't find my car. Even if it had been there, I was in no condition to drive. My mind was clouded. I could barely think straight. I called my mom to come and pick me up. She was obviously upset. She knew something was wrong. "What have you done?" she shouted into the phone. "I do not know," I shouted back. "I need help." My mother reluctantly came and took me home. She was furious. We went to the pharmacy to get emergency contraception. I was ashamed and embarrassed. To make matters worse, neither Mom nor Dad believed me when I said I didn't know what had happened. They've always trusted me, but not this time. I remember being in that hotel room with a man. I tried to explain. He must have lured me there. Look at my wrists and ankles. There are marks, but they were already disappearing. I remember him saying that I would marry him. Yesterday afternoon, after celebrating in the office with Ryan and others, everything was a blur until I woke up at 11. I feel so exhausted, unnaturally tired. I wasn't drunk. I only drank a soft drink. No matter how much I insisted, especially to Mom, she thought I was deliberately having an affair. I swore I would never betray Michael. I love him and our girls too much to hurt them. After Michael made it clear I wasn't welcome at our home, they reluctantly suggested I stay in the garage annex, where Dad's mom had stayed when she was ill. The condition was to have as little contact as possible. They insisted I find a flat soon. They didn't want to lose access to their grandchildren because, according to Mom, I was a girl of easy virtue. That hurt more than any physical blow. I needed their support but received only their anger. I didn't understand what had happened. No one believed me. That hurt even more deeply than Michael's hurtful words. It took me 2 days to calm down and think rationally enough to ask Mom to let me come to the house to get my clothes. I didn't want Michael or the girls there when I did, after what he had said. On the 3rd day, I called in sick to work. Ryan had spread the word that I was taking a few days off to reassess my life. How did he find out? My car was parked at the office, so I took a taxi there to retrieve it. I didn't want another heated argument with my furious mother. Finding my clothes wasn't a scavenger hunt. Michael had left a clear note that they were all in the garage. I packed them into bin bags and loaded them into my car. In exchange, I left behind my house keys, garage remote, and rings. Keeping myself composed, I surveyed what used to be a happy home. Happiness seemed like a distant memory now. Alone in the annex, every waking moment was spent racking my brain, trying to understand what had happened to me. I knew I would never betray Michael, so why did I? The answer eluded me. I returned to work on Monday, feeling like I could star in a zombie movie without direction. I was merely going through the motions. Ryan was unusually attentive, going out of his way to help me. I was wary of his kindness, but why? Up, work, solitary moments, bed. A perfect routine for a 40-year-old. Michael got his wish. I hope, as a cheater, you live unhappily for the rest of your miserable life. I still don't understand why I didn't end it all. I had thoughts of doing something to myself every time I quarreled with my mother, which happened often. Perhaps the only reason was my desperate need to understand why I was in that damn room in the first place. My parents completely ignored me. I had hoped they would listen, but they didn't even try. I stopped attempting to communicate with them altogether. My father seemed willing to talk, but my mother kept him quiet. None of my coworkers seemed interested in helping either. I knew my own attitude didn't help in that regard. I had isolated myself to shield from hurt. I was excluded from the group of friends Michael and I used to have. I despised myself for what I had done. I felt worthless. I needed a friend to support me, but I was alone, feeling like a promiscuous, disgraceful person. 2 weeks later, a tract delivery envelope arrived containing Michael's divorce petition, citing my adultery as grounds. His friend David was representing him as the lawyer, which wasn't unexpected given the harshness of Michael's accusations. We had always agreed that adultery would spell the end of our marriage. I sought out a solicitor to prepare my response. When I told her about the current situation, she expressed surprise that no one recommended that I be tested for prohibited substances. However, it was too late now. I scolded myself for not considering this possibility earlier, despite the fact that I watched programs about dating crimes and discussed them with my daughters. How could I have overlooked such a critical issue? Michael and David proposed a fair division of assets, but they insisted on denying me any access to my daughters. My solicitor suggested counseling and visitation rights in response. Michael resisted the idea of counseling initially, but eventually agreed to allow visitation, knowing that the court might mandate it otherwise. After their 3rd visit, I consulted my lawyer and requested to relinquish any visitation rights. While I would welcome future communication from them, I couldn't bear causing them the pain they experienced while with me again. During their time with me, all they did was ask why, and I couldn't provide an answer that made sense to them. I don't know, wasn't acceptable to them or to me. They just cried and cried. I couldn't cry. I needed to understand why I had ruined our lives. Once I knew, I could put an end to this miserable existence. The next day was even more challenging. We had to go shopping and my eldest had to place some feminine hygiene products in the cart. I struggled to keep it together in the store. Leslie had always handled those private matters. The day after, Doreen, Leslie's mother, called. We'd always had a good relationship, so I couldn't resort to any mother-in-law jokes with her. John, her husband, and I got along very well. He had initially been protective of Leslie, when we first started dating, but soon realized how deeply I cared for her. Eventually, he even put away his shotgun. Michael, can Leslie come by to pick up her clothes? She knows you don't want to see her, so she'll wait until it's safe. She's heartbroken and claims she doesn't understand what she did or why. We find it hard to believe her. Your words are tearing her apart just as much. For now, she'll stay in the garage annex and look for a flat. We can barely speak. When I checked, the only available ones are in the Derwent estate, and even though she's made mistakes, I can't have her living there. I hope you and the girls will be okay with us visiting. If they come to us, we'll ensure Leslie stays away. I pondered her request for a few minutes. I'm certain she expected me to refuse both. I'll gather all her things and have them ready for her to pick up, I said. Leanne and Audrey need both of you in their lives, so let's just be normal grandparents for them. I could almost picture Doreen's expression of joy at that. Leslie packed her clothes, left her keys and rings. I sensed she acknowledged it was the end between us. Each day got a little easier. We settled into a routine. Gradually, we uncovered more of Leslie's belongings, things that had been in the laundry or ironing basket, or in places we hadn't checked before. She had always been so organized. Even her winter clothes were neatly stored away. When something was missing, Doreen acted as an intermediary, taking Leslie's found items home. David prepared the divorce papers, and we reviewed them together. The girls were adamant they didn't want to see their mother again. David warned this wouldn't hold in court, especially if Leslie contested it, as we both expected she would. He suggested counseling as a reasonable alternative, given that I hadn't spoken to her since that morning. He was right. Leslie did request counseling. Leanne and Audrey resisted meeting her, but I insisted they had to. If they didn't, the court would likely side with their mother over me. Each time they returned, they were deeply upset. Mom wouldn't tell us why. They'd say, "She just kept saying she didn't know. Why couldn't she tell us?" After their third visit, David received notification from Leslie's lawyer that she was withdrawing her request for visitation rights. This marked the first sign of Leslie returning to her usual self, prioritizing others. Whenever Doreen visited, she would give me updates on Leslie. Leslie still claimed she didn't understand why everything had happened. She became very withdrawn, sometimes sullen, and frequently angry at the situation. She continued to go to work, come home, and go straight to bed. She hadn't been out anywhere since that day. She wouldn't even sit outside in the sun on a nice day, something she had always loved to do. It took 6 months for the petition to be heard, and since everything was agreed upon, it proceeded smoothly. The sheriff noted the absence of visitation rights, but Leslie's lawyer explained that Leslie did not want to cause further distress to her children. If they wished to visit her later on, she would be glad to have them visit. I had 4 potential places lined up to move into, but I was taken aback when my mother refused to let me live in any of them. I suspect she was worried I might attract unwanted attention in those neighborhoods. They were in a very rough area, where such things were not uncommon. Honestly, if I had a choice, I wouldn't stay in that housing estate. Because they were so unwelcoming towards me, I insisted on paying rent for the annex. I didn't want to be seen as a charity case. I overheard a conversation at one of their parties. "Oh, our daughter, the disgrace. We've done what we could, but..." Every day I tried to figure out why I ended up in that situation, with those people, but nothing came to mind. My lawyer's warnings about illegal substances began to make sense, but I had no evidence. Even if I did, it wouldn't have helped. Michael was finally rid of the disgrace. For my peace of mind, I went to the STD clinic for a checkup, and thankfully the results were negative. I can't think of anything more humiliating that I've done. Ryan continued to show his charm at work. I began to feel uncomfortable in his presence, without knowing why. Although we had never been particularly close colleagues, this discomfort was new to me. I stopped attending office events altogether. If I used to enjoy being a part of society, helping to organize events, chatting during breaks and laughing together, Now I kept my distance from everyone. I noticed that several colleagues were watching me with concern. When I got home, I was left alone and immediately went to bed. I felt depressed. I looked around the room and remembered all my happy moments with my husband, how good we were together, and how he privately said that I'm just his girl. The divorce was finalized. I felt numb. Despite everything we had in common, Michael and I couldn't communicate properly. If we accidentally crossed paths at my parents' house, it ended in short exchanges full of anger. I held back my tears, not wanting to show him how much he had offended me. And yet, deep down, I knew that he could see the reflection of my pain in his eyes. I missed him and our daughters, but who cared about me now that I was labeled a girl of easy virtue? Of course, not to them, not to my parents, not even to my former friends from the very beginning. About a week after the divorce, everything fell into place. I kept my feelings to myself, rarely talking to anyone outside of work. One afternoon at work, Ryan came up to me. He suggested, "Now that you're free, why don't you marry me?" I exploded, shouting, "You don't look a bit like Michael." He looked stunned. I was stunned. Where did this outburst of anger come from? My heart was pounding and I was trembling, looking at him as if he were some kind of beast. An enraged Ryan approached my desk, but a woman intervened and ordered him to leave. He looked around the office as all the attention was focused on us. In the end, he reluctantly walked away. A woman, Brenda from another department, led me out of the office despite my confusion. I was sweating, my whole body was shaking uncontrollably. Despite my grief, I didn't shed a tear. We took refuge in my annex. Inside, Brenda asked me quietly, "What happened to you?" It was the first time anyone had asked me about it. Her concern was genuine. "Brenda, I do not know." I almost cried. No one believes me. My ex-husband, my kids, my parents, everyone thinks I'm a cheater. All I remember is that we celebrated a successful deal around 4 p.m. at the office. I drank a soft drink. I rarely drink alcohol. The next thing I know for sure is that it's 11 a.m. and I'm in a room at the Cornhill Hotel. I vaguely remember a man saying, "You're going to marry me." The next blurry memory is Michael finding me, apparently unconscious, on the bed. He showed me the photos he had taken. We didn't discuss it, but in his message, he calls me a girl of easy virtue. He won't believe that I have no idea why I was there, and he won't talk to me. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out why I did what obviously happened. I'm no closer to solving it. My lawyer suggested that I might have been given illegal substances. It makes sense when I think about it. But I have no proof. Who was this man? What have we done? Why? I never suspected Ryan until he said I should marry him. Since then, my instincts have warned me to be careful with him. But I do not know why. I asked, "How did this happen? Do you have any ideas?" "It's a long story," Brenda continued. "You are not the first. Many in the company are aware of Ryan and his actions. I suspect that even some members of the board of directors and senior management were involved in this. It's been 10 years now. What I can prove, compared to what I strongly suspect, is minimal. I know that in the Bristol office, Ryan worked with 2 dubious characters, Thatcher and Brown, who are now on the board of directors. I suspect they taught Ryan how to use illegal substances against girls. However, Ryan was not smart, and several women woke up screaming. The company paid handsomely to keep it a secret. The women didn't want their names in the headlines. There was another incident in the York office and another in Carlisle involving Ryan and a senior manager whom I did not name. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you kept what happened that night. It hurt so much that your mind hid it to protect you. Given what I know about him, I suspect Ryan planned everything carefully, waiting for an opportunity. Most likely, he slipped it into your drink when you were distracted, calculating when to leave with you without arousing suspicion. Judging by your description, he must have overdone it, a lot to be able to do what he did. He deliberately sent a message to your husband to find you. His words that you will marry him caused a backlash in you today. Then your mind woke up. The claims lack substantiation through factual or forensic analysis. We're unable to verify any of it. Blood and DNA tests could serve as evidence. I'm sure you've inferred that I believe I might be one of the women they assaulted. Like you, I lack proof. Unlike you, I still don't know who was involved. Ryan's words unlock your subconscious. I must tread carefully in investigating them. They wield considerable influence. From what I understand, this group is happy to share and add to their collection of stories using the company servers. Records of the payoffs reside in the most secure servers at the Inverness site. All company computers and phones are traceable when accessing our servers. Any attempt to investigate would be detected. Furthermore, these files are on a wired system, making remote access impossible. Cameras are omnipresent. The person in charge, Ailsa, is aware and keen to help dismantle them. She may have also been a victim. Accessing that information is nearly impossible. Ryan and others submit SD cards to her for uploading onto the wired servers. I suspect these contain accounts of their actions. Monthly, she transfers a specific set of files from these SD cards to one individual, likely disseminating updates to the rest. It's a thrill for them all. Ailsa is constantly monitored by cameras, preventing her from copying SD cards before inserting them into the system. She must immediately format the cards upon removal to avoid detection. If it appeared she hadn't, she would face severe consequences. Given what they stand to lose, they might go as far as to eliminate her. I'm sorry. I can't provide you with what you need to explain this to your daughters. I'll always be here to support you if you need assistance. Feel free to call me if you want to talk. I understand how challenging it is to articulate and come to terms with vague feelings and fleeting memories. I use a separate phone not associated with the company, so please contact me on that. I recommend you get a separate phone too. Avoid using your work phone or computer for anything related to gathering evidence. Ryan had access to yours, so you can't be sure what he might have concealed on it. Brenda's comments on the company and their knowledge were impressive. Despite lacking evidence, they still made sense to me. Finally, I saw a glimmer of hope. I have a training session scheduled in Inverness over 4 days and 3 weeks. I'm determined to find evidence if possible. Do you think Ailsa could provide details about the CCTV cameras and their operations? How can I identify which files to access? I used to know someone who could manipulate them to avoid detection. I'll reach out to her and plead for her assistance. She's taken Michael's side, like all our friends. I may never get him or my girls back, but at least I can provide them with the answers they seek. Brenda warned, Leslie, they are beyond the reach of the law. If you act and get caught, they'll fabricate charges against you, or worse. Ryan is ruthless enough to consider harming you, or worse still, arranging for you to be harmed. He trusts the old boys' network to protect him. I have nothing left to lose. I'm already as good as dead. I've lost everyone. Michael, my girls, my family, and friends. Death would just mean I'm not alone in this living nightmare every night. At least they'll have the closure they need. Brenda could see my despair and understood my determination to give closure to my family. I'll contact Ailsa for the information you need. I hope it helps. Remember, Ryan may be despicable, but he senses something has stirred in you since he spoke. He'll be cautious of you. He's watching. You must apologize and behave as usual. If he suspects you're digging deeper, you'll be in real danger. Call me if you need anything. We parted ways but stayed in touch over the following weeks. Her support helped me confront what was inevitable. The next few weeks at work were tense. I apologized to Ryan and sought his forgiveness. I made sure not to repeat the hurtful words, hoping he would think I had forgotten them and their context. While I appreciated his attempts to support me, I was consumed with grief over losing my daughters. They refused to speak to me, and I couldn't consider entering into any new relationships at that time. I wasn't sure if Ryan suspected anything. He never brought up those words again, but kept his distance. I didn't show any signs of life, and each night I locked away my work phone. My first task was to persuade Ruth, The computer hacker. I caught her off guard. The conversation was just as challenging as I had anticipated. Ruth, I need your help, I pleaded. Why should I help you? She snapped angrily. Ruth, I'm begging you, not for myself, but for Lean and Audrey. Please give me a few minutes to explain. You can say no, and I won't bother you again. I promise. Her eyes met mine. She must have sensed my desperation. Finally, she nodded. I have good reason to believe that I was given illegal substances, and someone informed me that this is not the first time this has happened. This involves many senior figures at my company. It seems they record their actions on a secure server. I want access to those records. If I can obtain them, they will prove everything. After that, I need to share those records with people who can expose them. I need to act quickly because I'm likely to be caught, either inside the secure area or just outside. If they find me, they won't hesitate to kill me. I've already lost Michael, the girls, my family, and friends. They deserve closure. If I die trying, I lose nothing because I've already lost everything. But if I can bring them down and prevent others from suffering like me, I have to try. I need your help. I don't have the expertise to hack their system. I have information on their system and operations. Please help me without asking how. Ruth studied me for a moment. I thought she might reject me outright. But then she said, Okay, I can't imagine you ever betraying Michael, so something major must have happened. If you have been given illegal substances, it makes sense. Powerful men. I'll do it for Lean and Audrey. I hope you succeed in taking those bastards down. How can we access those servers and others? I handed her the plans Brenda had provided. I can't use my work computer or phone since they're identified by tokens. The files are on a closed wired system, so I need to find a way in. There are security cameras. I'll be there in 2 weeks for 4 nights. I'll review these and let you know soon if it's feasible. I shared my new mobile number with her and explained why I had a second phone. She then asked for my work phone number, offering to check it for me. I provided her with my login details, with the agreement to change them after she had reviewed it. At work, I visited HR to discuss updating various pensions, deductions, and policies I had set up for my family through the company, citing my divorce as the reason. I intended to designate the cash values to my daughters, but was dismayed to discover that in the event of my death, my pension would only pay out 25% to them. To ensure they received the full amount, I decided to cash in the pension now and place it into a trust fund to avoid taxation. Unfortunately, I couldn't alter the life insurance payout to them directly because they are minors. I spoke with my mother and arranged for her to be the beneficiary, ensuring she would ensure the funds reached the girls. Her surprise at my request prompted me to think, as if you care. I assured her I was not ill but simply planning ahead for their future. When my daughters turned 18, I planned to update the arrangements so they would receive the funds directly. I met with my lawyer and drafted a new will. Essentially, everything was to go to my daughters. My mother was furious when I told her there would be no funeral. She fell silent when I remarked, "Who would attend the funeral of a woman like that?" I have no friends, though I didn't explicitly mention excluding family. Her reaction indicated she understood it included my father and herself. Ruth called me the following week. I spent Sunday morning with her. To cut a long story short, I needed to gain access via a non-work computer, install a program to control the cameras, which would record the same 20-minute loop showing typical events, and simultaneously access the wired system. I required multiple SD cards for this. Ruth provided a high-speed encrypted satellite phone for uploading the data as soon as I left the room. The encryption was top-notch. I planned to send the data to Brenda, David, and myself. If anything happened to me, they would receive letters explaining how to access the files. Ruth warned me that my work phone logged my calls and recipients, sending reports to someone in Bristol. She believed it wasn't actively listening when I wasn't on a call but cautioned me to stay vigilant. When I arrived home, my mom surprised me with some unexpected good news, the first in months. She said, "Leslie, Leanne has asked me to ask you if you'd consider making the dress you planned for her dance. She's been searching for one but can't find anything she likes. Would you be willing to make it?" I replied, "I'd be happy to, but I'll need to use my sewing machine and work tables at home. Leanne should come with me so I can tailor the pattern to fit her. I'll be away next week, so we'd have to do it now, or I won't have time before the dance. All the materials are ready at home. Do you think Michael and the girls will be okay with me coming over?" Mom nodded, saying, "Michael expected you to say that. He mentioned that the sewing machine table was quite a task to set up, and he's not sure how to move it here. They're willing to help you out. Please give them a call to confirm. If Leanne is free, I can start this afternoon." So I found myself standing outside my old house. My heart raced, my palms sweaty. I was frightened, afraid of my own family. The neighbors were surely peeking through their curtains, witnessing the drama of the woman they considered a disgrace being turned away. I could almost hear their jaws dropping when Leanne let me in. I nearly dropped in surprise myself. Michael observed as we entered what had once been my sanctuary, where I used to unwind with my crafts. He had taken over the garage. Our conversation, if you could call it that, was strained. We struggled. Leanne was unsure how to approach me, so I reassured her. "Leanne, I will always love you, Audrey, and your dad. I believe I understand what happened, and I'm trying to gather the evidence you all need. I know I can't undo the damage. If you ever need my help, just ask. I don't expect your friendship or love in return. Knowing I've been of help is enough. Let's focus on your dress, not why I'm no longer here. We'll need to talk, so let's work together like old times. We'll lay out the pattern and fabric first, then we'll have to check your actual measurements." Audrey kept bringing us drinks. She was cautious at first, but later she smiled at me. It was a first in a long while. We exchanged a few words without arguing. The afternoon passed quickly. I was surprised when Audrey came downstairs to announce that dinner was ready. I offered to stay and continue working on the material while Leanne had her meal. I was taken aback when Audrey said, "Dad's made enough for you as well." Although I rarely ate more than once a day, if at all, I accepted the invitation. It would have been rude to decline. I'm sure he noticed I had lost quite a bit of weight. It wasn't our best dinner together. In fact, it was probably the worst. The atmosphere was tense, to say the least. I complimented Michael on his improved cooking. It was after 9 p.m. when I finished marking and cutting. Leanne and I pinned the pieces, and she tried it on. It needed a few minor adjustments, but she would look fantastic. I asked Michael what time everyone would be home the next day, as I planned to come over and start sewing the dress together. I mentioned I needed a couple of items to finish it, which I would get during my lunch break. He handed me a spare house key and said, "If you finish before I do. And Leanne and Audrey have hockey practice. We'll be back around 6:30 p.m. We usually grab burgers from the local place." I told him I would likely still be there, but not to worry about a meal for me. I'd grab something if I got hungry. By Wednesday evening, the dress was completed. Leanne modeled it and received enthusiastic wows from both her dad and Audrey. I persuaded Leanne to let me pick her up on Saturday to buy some more sophisticated lingerie, which would boost her self-esteem, not overly revealing, but good quality and supportive. I explained this to Michael, expecting a negative response, but he agreed. I returned the house key. That Saturday morning felt reminiscent of old times. My mom joined us. Leanne seemed intrigued by some daring items, but we vetoed her choices. I suspect she was teasing me, having seen similar things of mine. She was thrilled with her final picks, more mature than juvenile, yet still protective. As she pointed out the risque items, memories surfaced of times I wore such lingerie to excite Michael. It now felt like a distant era. What had I sacrificed, and why? Later, we enjoyed coffee and cake. I surprised her with another gift, a spiky bottle stopper. It allowed her to drink safely, preventing anyone from tampering with her drink. She needed to be cautious of unscrupulous individuals. I gave her a few more for her friends, emphasizing the importance of safety first. After dropping her off, Mom inquired about the bottle stoppers. I simply remarked, "I wish I had one of those." Her reaction was priceless. Perhaps she would come to grasp the significance later on. Before heading to Inverness, I informed her about 2 envelopes. One meant for David if something happened to me, and another for my only friend. She pressed for details, but I insisted it was for her safety that I couldn't disclose more. She seemed more interested than she had in the last 8 months, worrying about me, a despised woman, a so-called girl of easy virtue. Traveling to Inverness, I was filled with anticipation and sorrow. It was likely I would never see my daughters again. I cherished those fleeting hours with them. I had resigned myself to the probability of being caught, assuming I could even gain access. Brenda had made it clear I faced either imprisonment or more likely death if I spoke out, as certain accusations would inevitably stick. My only hope was to succeed and use the satellite phone link before being apprehended and silenced. On Monday morning, Ryan himself presented me with the opportunity. He had been trying to reach me for some files I had been working on, so he contacted the hotel. I explained in my haste that I had left my phone at the office and my work laptop was dead, possibly faulty from not charging properly before I left on Friday. I planned to use the hotel's business suite to access and forward the files to him. I managed to do so, despite using an unfamiliar computer and dealing with camera controls. Now, all I could do was hope it worked. The training session ended around 3:30 to accommodate those participants who lived nearby. I griped about the condition of my local roads, contrasting them with theirs, which seemed as smooth as highways. I made my excuses to my training colleagues to avoid any post-session socializing. Instead, I headed to the server building. Elsa was already there. Though we had never spoken before, we remained silent due to the presence of microphones. She left me a note with a list of file directories and names. They seemed nonsensical at first glance, but effective for concealing something. I accessed the camera feed and initiated the recycling program. I set it to record from just before my arrival, ensuring no one would notice my presence in the footage if it was reviewed. Ruth had explained the technicalities, though they were largely beyond my understanding. I had to trust her expertise. Otherwise, both Elsa and I would face serious consequences. I checked the monitor and saw no one present. I accessed the secure server and located the files Elsa had documented. Downloading them took around 5 to 10 minutes due to their volume. I barely remember breathing, anticipating security to intervene. Inserting multiple SD cards into the satellite phone, I quickly uploaded them in a matter of seconds, feeling relieved. Regardless of what happened next, those files would ensure justice against those responsible. Leaving the server room, I deleted the program as instructed by Ruth, amazed at how I had managed to evade detection so far. I disposed of Elsa's note. The following 3 days were tense. Every new person in the classroom made me fear being discovered. Returning home late Thursday left me mentally drained. Seeing Lean's photo in her dress lifted my spirits. She looked stunning in her modest dress, ending above her knees in a flattering pencil style. The blue fabric accentuated her hair and eyes. She was sure to captivate many hearts. I hoped she'd find someone like Michael. At work on Friday, everything remained peaceful. I apologized for not having my phone, attributing it to my scatterbrained state lately. It was a convincing excuse. Over the weekend, I recorded messages for Lean and Audrey, expressing my deep love and pride in them. These were farewell messages, knowing that trouble was imminent. All I could say to Michael was, "I'm sorry," and tears streamed as I spoke into the recording. They were the first tears since that morning. By 7:30 a.m. on Monday, I stood outside David's office with a large box and envelope. I had spent the weekend reviewing those files. It was worse than Brenda suspected. She and I also were victims, just as she had feared. I couldn't bring myself to read their files. When David arrived, I intercepted him. He was displeased. "Leslie, leave before I call security." I was resolute. I pleaded with him. "David, I know what happened to me. I was given prohibited substances. I have evidence that senior company officials not only knew but were involved in similar acts. Please give me 5 minutes. I can't undo what's done. I know Michael and the girls may never forgive me, but I need them to understand I didn't do this willingly. I want you to expose them. Use all available means to bring them down. Sue them. They've paid out large sums before. The money could secure Michael and the girls' future. Give the evidence to the police. Please, David." I managed to convince him to reluctantly let me into his office. I handed him a box with a detailed description of the company's actions. It documented 8 payments to women who were victims of attacks, for a 7-figure sum each. It involved 5 board members, 6 senior managers, and at least 17 lower-level executives, some of whom were still active. Ryan played a key role in organizing several of these attacks and supplied medicines from a doctor who collaborated with him. They seemed to enjoy telling each other about their actions. Each attack was scrupulously described, with the names of the women involved and all the details of the process, as well as the perpetrators. Reading some of them, I felt physically ill. I couldn't bring myself to read anymore. My story was documented in these files. Ryan was the one who gave me the illegal substances and arranged for Michael to find me. I informed David about the "Marry Me" incident, which led me to the person who offered to help. I resisted Ryan, so he never managed to do anything to me. In the end, he couldn't stand it and just left his mark on my face. David was speechless. I told him that photos and videos of these incidents were saved on the server. I sent him all the contents, including this data, along with the encryption key. I warned him about using the company's computers and phones. When you submit the documents, chaos will begin. They'll come after me, and I think they might try to eliminate me to silence me. They won't let me speak out. Here is my new phone number. Please text me when you submit the documents so that I will be on my guard. I'm not afraid of death. I already feel like that. I've lost everything and everyone. In a way, it will be a relief." David seemed shocked to hear this outspoken statement and fell silent. The second envelope contains all my preparations, my will, my last messages to the girls, to Michael. My lawyer will handle the legal aspects, but I want you to hand over the records to them. I know you'll want to tell Michael everything. You will need his consent to bring a case against the company. But please don't tell him about the danger. He needs to focus on the girls. I will always love them, even though I know that I have lost them. I finished with tears in my eyes. These were the second tears I had allowed myself since I left that room. David promised to look through these files. If they confirm what I told him, he will take the necessary steps with Michael's approval. I could see that he wanted to say more, but I didn't know how to express it. When I left his office, I was overwhelmed by a wave of relief. I knew that my torment was coming to an end. Michael will get an answer soon. I was relieved to find that Ryan didn't take advantage of me. He just didn't succeed, which means I've remained loyal to Michael so far. The next day at work, I couldn't hide my smile. Karina, one of the girls, noticed this and asked, "What put you in such a good mood?" I told her that Leanne had sent me some photos from her dance, in which she looks absolutely amazing and is having a great time. Karina joked, "You still have hope." If only she knew. In the weeks that followed, Leanne sent me news messages from time to time. Whenever she visited my mom, she would drop by for a short chat. 2 months after meeting with David, I received a message from him confirming that he had submitted the documents. The firm's lawyers were furious, apparently because of the behavior of several high-ranking employees, but I suspected that the evidence I discovered left them no room for objections. They were working in damage control mode. Although I should have felt justified and happy, all I felt was relief. It will all be over soon. David also alerted the police, who launched their own investigation. I thought impatiently, they better hurry up. After I came back from Inverness, I spoke with Ruth and explained that things were even worse than I had anticipated. She asked if I had been given prohibited substances. I confirmed that I had, but assured her that I had managed to resist the assailant. It turned out I hadn't been unfaithful after all. Ruth was visibly shocked. I expressed my gratitude because her work had enabled me to find closure for Michael and our daughters. Additionally, over 170 victims would also benefit from her efforts. Her jaw dropped at the scale of it. According to her, if she were on the jury, no defense would convince her to vote not guilty. She was determined to set things right. I sought her advice on how to ensure that any attempt on my life, if someone entered my house to harm me, would be recorded or broadcast for those who needed to see it. Ruth then installed some equipment for me. I had to leave while she set it up, so I didn't know the specifics of where or what to look for. She showed me a couple of discreetly placed but detectable cameras that a professional might search for. If someone breached their system, they would anticipate some surveillance in my own home. She also took precautions with my car, just in case. I was now prepared. All that remained was to wait. When Lene approached me about suggesting Leslie make the dress for her dance, I was taken aback. Given Lene's anger towards Leslie, I never thought she would propose such a thing. Lene explained she had searched everywhere, but found no dress she loved as much as the one she and her mom had decided to make. Even as I voiced my concerns, I questioned the wisdom of this decision. "Are you sure about this? Leslie will likely need to come here since all her materials are here. It will take time, and you'll need to support her. Can you manage without falling into conflict?" I wondered silently. "Can I?" Lene paused before responding. "I think so." She might refuse, recalling their previous interactions. I hesitated to voice my doubts. Our few encounters had not ended well for either of us, and I could see the hurt in Leslie's eyes. Stalling for time, I suggested, "We'll need Audrey's permission too. She's involved in this. Having her mom here might be overwhelming for her." Lene agreed quietly. Audrey reluctantly agreed, though she wasn't pleased. Lene called her grandmother. Around lunchtime on Sunday, Doreen called back to confirm Leslie would make the dress, but she needed access to her materials. With her upcoming course, she could only start that week, possibly that afternoon, if Lene was available. We agreed. When Leslie knocked on the door, it surprised everyone. I hadn't expected her to knock. I assumed she'd just come in. Lene welcomed her inside, and the room fell silent. I managed to say, "Thank you." Lene and Leslie headed to the craft room to begin. While preparing dinner, I decided to make enough for Leslie as well, though I hesitated, unsure if she would accept. Leslie had noticeably lost weight, her face appearing drawn at age, and her clothes hanging loosely. It was a stark contrast to her usual self-care. We had disagreements in the past about my eating habits. Audrey was busy ensuring everyone had drinks, smiling throughout. When the meal was ready, I asked Audrey to invite her mom to join us. The atmosphere was unusual, lacking the usual cheerful chatter and stories. Leslie complimented my improved culinary skills. By Wednesday, she had finished it. Lene looked stunning. Leslie had always been skilled, but she had clearly devoted much effort to make Lene shine. She asked to take Lene shopping on Saturday for more suitable underwear, which surprised me. I had been dreading having to handle that myself. Audrey, too, was nearing the age where she would need similar attire. 2 weeks later, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. David phoned me urgently, insisting I drop everything and rush to his office. I was taken aback. "What's going on?" I asked. "We need to talk, face to face. Unless it's a matter of life or death, come over now." "I can't discuss this over the phone," he replied urgently. I hurried to his office, concerned by his uncharacteristic agitation. David, typically unshakable, now seemed visibly distressed, like an Olympian in panic mode. I was stunned by his demeanor. Michael, usually so upbeat, appeared deeply worried. This couldn't be good, I thought. "Michael," he said gravely, What I have to show you could provide closure or bring significant trouble, possibly both. It poses serious risks, not to you directly, but to someone close. Let me outline the essence of these documents. He gestured towards a pile on his desk. How they affect your lives, the legal options, and my recommendations if you choose to pursue this. I started to worry. David's tone hinted at something very disturbing about my family. He knew that he had my full attention. What he said next completely stunned me. Leslie contacted me yesterday, he began. I started to speak, feeling my anger boil up, but he motioned for me to shut up. She didn't intentionally avoid talking to you. It's not that she doesn't want to talk to you. Let me explain. She spent an hour telling me everything. Leslie wasn't lying to you when she claimed she didn't know what happened that night. I stared at him in disbelief. He was my friend, but he still believed her. She needed to sort herself out, and since then, she has been trying to convince everyone of her rightness. Her lawyer put forward a theory that matched the evidence, but she had no evidence. Then last month, an incident at her workplace brought back some repressed memories. With the help of another person, she managed to put everything together. She took a big risk to reveal the truth about that night. She discovered that her colleague Ryan was not only involved in the attack on her, but was also part of a larger group that includes powerful men, some of whom are her bosses. She found out that they keep records of their activities on a highly secure server in their office in Inverness. When she went there, she intended to break into that server and obtain those files, hoping to expose many high-ranking employees of her firm for their crimes. She wanted to find out what happened to her in order to clarify the situation for everyone involved. Since Leslie left, all I've done is look through these files. More than 170 women, including Leslie. Everything is described in detail, and it's terrible. She wants us to take action against them, bring them to justice, sue them, and use the money to secure the future for you and the girls. She doesn't want that. Transfer the money to the police for investigation if they agree. The people involved occupy such a high position in the ruling circles that they probably think they are allowed to do anything and get away with it. And unfortunately, this is often the case. These documents confirm that everything she said is true. She wants to put an end to it. She repeated it repeatedly. If we go after them, they'll probably try to silence her. They'll track her down to keep her from speaking out. I shouldn't have told you that. She gave me copies of all her documents, wills, and so on. She took her pension and put it in trust for the girls. Everything goes to them. She doesn't want a funeral. Who will attend the funeral? She has no family or friends. This harsh statement of fact caused me deep pain. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Michael, there was one file about her assault. Despite being under the influence of illegal substances, she fought off Ryan, her colleague. He never managed to do anything with her. He's the one who texted you. He wants to marry her. I was stunned. I kept replaying those terrible minutes in my head. I was so furious when I found her that I didn't even look at her properly. Instead of looking at her, I took photos. She wasn't drunk. Despite this, she rebuffed him. I felt completely useless. I let her down when she needed me the most, and in the months that followed, I only made the situation worse. Almost every time we talked, I asked, why? She always said she didn't know, and that only made me angrier. Now I understand why. But it's too late. When you mentioned Inverness, she said that she spent a week at home working on a dress for Leon. She never mentioned anything about the files. She seemed happy to spend time with Leon and Audrey. David paused and then said something that shocked me to the core. She didn't expect to survive. She used an encrypted satellite phone to send me these files by email. Her mom had an encryption code that she could give me if she got caught. She was ready to give up her life to destroy them because she had nothing else to live for. I was speechless. My jaw dropped. I was the cause of it, and tears were streaming down my face. I'm going to find Ryan and do this to him myself, I exclaimed. David was firm. No, we'll go after him and them. We're going to get justice for Leslie and keep you out of jail. Who will take care of the girls?" David knew he had me in his hands. Despite my rage, I knew he was right. I was mad at Ryan, but I was even more mad at myself. How could I ignore the Leslie I knew? "What should we do?" I managed to inquire, struggling to focus as my thoughts scattered. "I'll gather all the necessary documents. We'll sue them for allowing and even facilitating various acts as a company. The impact on your marriage and your daughters and family is substantial. They've settled seven-figure sums in similar cases before. I'll also ensure the other women involved have the evidence they need to pursue their claims. I'm also going to reach out to a trusted contact in the police force. He's tenacious and will push to see them all behind bars, regardless of their connections. It's going to get messy. Their legal team will try every trick to dismiss the evidence due to how it was obtained. They might succeed, but their actions and identities will be exposed publicly. The media will be all over it. That might work in our favor. What kind of judge would want to undermine evidence in cases of such a serious crime? The public won't tolerate the old boys network protecting their own in situations like this. It will take a few weeks to prepare everything. My entire firm will need to be fully engaged. We have only one opportunity to do this properly for Leslie and the other victims." David gave me a solemn look that suggested he could read my thoughts. "Michael, no matter what you might consider, you can't change your behavior around Leslie. If you do anything differently, it might indicate that you're aware of something, putting you at risk, too." Needing reassurance, I pressed further. "David, how much danger is Leslie in? Is she exaggerating?" "Michael, these people are deeply connected. Based on what's in those documents, I'm convinced she won't be safe if they discover she took those files." His response only added to my confusion. I spent about 2 hours with David in total. By the time I left, I was completely bewildered. Everything I thought I understood had been shattered. Leslie had been the one fighting for our marriage, battling against the odds. I had never listened to her, never given her a chance to explain her ignorance. I had hurt her so deeply that she felt life wasn't worth living. My words, "a miserable life," now seemed painfully accurate for both of us. How could I ever mend things with her after everything I'd done? I had destroyed our marriage. Worse, I had made her a target, and I was powerless to protect her. After receiving David's message, I composed myself to wait. Despite anticipating my demise, I remained surprisingly composed. Around 7 in the evening, I heard a car pull up. The door slammed shut, and footsteps hurried towards mine. To my surprise, it was Ryan. I had anticipated him sending someone else. "To hell with you. Do you even realize what you've done?" He was furious, looking around the neighborhood to make sure I was alone. He found Ruth's baits and pulled them out. "I'm going to do something terrible to you. We're in charge here. You can hurt someone, but we'll get over it. We always do that." I tried to keep my composure. "Amazing, Ryan. I didn't think you'd have the guts to actually do something like that. I mean, the 3.5-inch excuse. You couldn't even touch me when I was unconscious. What kind of fun did you and these jerks have? Was that the only way to keep them from laughing at your little tools?" It seemed to strike a chord with him as he pulled out the knife. "Are you going to beg for your life?" He chuckled. "No, I'm done. Because of you. I've lost everyone I cared about. You'll just end my loneliness, and you'll end up in jail." I grinned, and he took a step toward me. I wasn't defending myself. I was actually smiling. Just as he was about to strike, I heard my father's voice. "Drop the knife, or I'll shoot." Ryan turned around and saw my dad with a shotgun. He moved towards my father, who warned him again. When he charged, my father pulled the trigger. Ryan was thrown across the room. "Dad, are you okay?" I screamed. Dad hugged me as I burst into uncontrollable tears. Mom came running and talked to Dad. I fainted. When I woke up, paramedics were treating me. The police talked to Dad. They were going to arrest him. I told them that everything was recorded. They should talk to Ruth. She'll tell them where to find it. I lost consciousness again. Apparently, this happened several times. I woke up, lost consciousness. Later, I learned that they contacted Ruth, who disclosed the locations of the cameras she had placed in and around the house. They then took the SD card from the main camera in that room and inserted it into my computer. Apparently, the footage didn't look any better there. My mom was already in shock, but when she saw what had happened, she hugged my dad and cried, repeatedly saying, "I could have lost you both." The detective reportedly stated, "Clearly a case of self-defense." I found myself in an ambulance, wires seemingly protruding from everywhere. Breathing was difficult, and I couldn't focus on anything. I drifted in and out of consciousness, so my memory of the hospital stay was fuzzy. I was eventually sedated with something because I was in a critical condition. Later, I was informed that the recordings indicated I posed a danger to myself, leading psychiatrists to sedate me for several days. When I regained consciousness, my mom was by my side. She appeared genuinely relieved to see me awake. My first question was, "Where's Dad?" "Your dad's okay. He just stepped out briefly after sitting for a while. We've all been so worried about you. Your heart rate has been erratic. They were concerned you might have a stroke or heart attack. They think it's because you're so underweight. I knew you had lost weight, but I didn't realize it was this much." "Why?" "I had no appetite. I didn't care about anything anymore. I lost everything I valued. Why would I want to go on?" My mom started crying. "Leslie, we misjudged you. We never listened. We should have. We never imagined you would cheat on Michael. But those photos he sent us." She couldn't continue. I changed the subject. "How did Dad know to come to the annex?" "David called and warned us that you were in danger and to watch out for you." "Your dad asked how serious it was." "David said someone might try to kill you." "We were shocked. Despite everything, we love you." Dad grabbed his shotgun. I won't use his clay pigeon hobby as an excuse for drinking anymore. When Dad returned, he wore a broad smile. "I'm relieved to see you awake," he said. "Leanne and Audrey have been bombarding me with texts every 5 minutes, worried sick about you. How are you feeling?" I paused for a moment before replying. "I'm not sure. I never expected to be here. I'm just glad you're okay. I couldn't believe it when you walked in." "What happened with the police?" "We weren't allowed to see you for 2 days while they had you heavily sedated," he explained. "You fought through that." I gave them my statement, and they seemed satisfied with it. "The recordings were a big help. Michael came by with David and the girls," he continued. "They filled us in on everything that happened to you, how you uncovered it all, and hacked into their secret files to expose them. The police are rounding them up now. It's all over the news. Some of those involved are well-known names. Since we've been allowed to be with you, your mother and I have been here whenever possible. When she couldn't be, Leanne was here," he added. "Michael asked to be kept informed. He's looking after Audrey, who's really struggling." The news hit her hard. She couldn't bear the thought of losing you. We didn't realize she had slipped out to the annex. The sight of blood all over the room frightened her so much. Tears welled up in my eyes. "How could I have been so selfish?" I cried. "I didn't think about how my death would affect my daughters." Mom held me close. A nurse arrived and requested them to depart. I had scheduled lunch and therapy. They could return after 2:30 p.m. I hesitated to part with my mom. The nurse expressed understanding. "All right, your mom can stay. She can assist you with eating." That marked the initial step toward recovery, an ongoing journey. The psychiatrist was highly skilled. The therapy delved into my reasons for wanting to end my life. She encouraged me to open up about the events, my feelings of being ostracized by loved ones. I had suppressed much of the pain. Feeling disbelieved made me question my self-worth and relationships. Over numerous sessions in the following 10 days, she helped me see that rebuilding those relationships was possible, albeit they would be different. Although this crime was significant, it was not the driving force behind my search for answers. It was the unknowns. Why I allowed it, who was involved, what led to my infidelity. These questions stirred intense emotional responses. The lack of answers prevented any peace. I couldn't understand why I would betray, and until I did, I couldn't find peace. I needed answers, not only for myself, but also for my family's closure. This drove my seemingly suicidal quest to uncover those truths. She continued, "Now that you know the truth, you can focus on rebuilding your self-esteem. You've shown immense courage, determination, and resolve in pursuing this. You've proven you're not worthless." I remained unconvinced. She asked me why I didn't defend myself when Ryan attacked me. I explained that I found some solace in the prospect of death, knowing I hadn't betrayed Michael. Life had become unbearable with the pain and disapproval from my family. She smiled gently and remarked that my uncertainty about my faithfulness had shaped my identity. I had never sought forgiveness because I couldn't forgive myself. Now, however, I knew the truth. I hadn't been unfaithful, and I understood why I was in that situation. My daughters, my parents, and Michael now knew the truth too. I had the chance to rebuild those relationships or choose solitude. She hoped I would value myself enough to open up to love again. I hesitated, unsure if I could. Despite my desire to die during those dark times, I realized I hadn't considered how it would affect my daughters. Audrey was deeply upset, and Leanie was trying to cope. I wanted to forge a new bond with them, despite the challenges ahead. I promised to stay positive, acknowledging the difficulty of the path ahead, but resolving not to give up. She spoke softly. "Audrey is receiving support from a colleague who is very adept with her. She had the same question as you about why, but arrived at a different answer. She didn't want them in her life." I was taken aback. Learning what you did to give her that answer showed her how much you cared for them in the end. Nearly losing you without reconciling what you had damaged deeply affected her. She's making good progress. You need time. The trauma is still fresh. Rome wasn't built in a day. And reclaiming yourself, the Leslie from before all this happened, will take time. Don't rush. There will be setbacks. Let us help you. Allow others to lend a hand when you need it. Sometimes scream if it becomes too overwhelming. Don't keep it bottled up. I nodded, though it was overwhelming. I'll do whatever you suggest to help them. I believe we are nearing an agreement for you to leave the hospital. I recommend family counseling. It won't be easy, but it can pave a way forward for all of you, whether together or separately. Time will tell. Michael hasn't spoken to anyone that I know of. He's been entirely focused on helping your daughters. The media attention on your family has been intense. Your father is seen as a hero by many, saving his daughter. The men you exposed are not enjoying the spotlight. I advise against media interviews. Let your lawyer handle those. Concentrate on your recovery and that of the girls. I nodded. I never wanted to be famous or now infamous. The derogatory labels. I just wanted to be a mother to my daughters and a wife to Michael. I'll attend family counseling so I can support them if they need me. There are so many strained relationships to mend. She continued, "We'll continue our meetings because there's a lot we need to address based on your responses. You are not what those labels suggest, but you still see yourself that way. We need to work on that. It's important to prioritize your daughters, but you must also focus on your own well-being. You can't support them if you're not well yourself. You might see it as unwelcome news, but you'll be discharged into your parents' care. They'll help ensure you eat, attend therapy, and start rebuilding yourself. It's not mandatory, so if circumstances change and you want to live with Michael and the girls, and they agree, that can happen. You need support just as much as they do. Your mom has been collaborating with a nutritionist to ensure you eat properly, not excessively, but enough to regain your strength. You'll be able to go home tomorrow." I'd wondered, home? Where exactly is that? The weeks felt like they were dragging on. David got in touch with me, saying that today was the day. He planned to inform Leslie so she could prepare herself. I was overwhelmed with worry. I arrived at the school early to ensure the girl's safety. I was unsure how to handle Leslie's situation. Would she be safe? Around 8 p.m., my phone rang. It was Doreen. She quickly briefed me on what had happened. I was shocked to hear that John had killed Ryan to stop him from harming Leslie. That was supposed to be my responsibility. John was okay, but Leslie was being rushed to the hospital. Her heart was in distress, and the paramedics were very concerned. Doreen promised to keep me updated as they departed in the ambulance. I broke the news to the girls, who were stunned and deeply worried. I assured them I would explain everything later, but for now, we had to pray for their mother's recovery. We held each other close all night, anxiously waiting by the phone. Doreen continued to provide updates, each call adding to my sense of guilt. Leslie was not doing well, both physically and mentally. It was well past midnight when they finally left the hospital. Leslie had been sedated, but she was fighting it. The next day, David, the girls, and I visited their house to clarify everything. The expressions on her parents' faces, the disbelief on the girls' faces when David recounted all that Leslie had endured to uncover why she had been in that hotel room were overwhelming. David had been informed by his police friend that they found a file in Ryan's house detailing his plans to abduct Leslie and his intentions for her. Leslie had fought him off, which enraged him. He kept a memento of her pubic hair as a tribute and was planning another attempt. Doreen was sobbing uncontrollably, the anguish evident in her cries. I never believed she didn't know. I called her names, accused her. She was struggling. Every argument we had, I saw her pain deepen. I knew she was suffering but couldn't bring myself to help her, thinking she was complicit. But she wasn't. She'll never forgive me. She'll hate me rightfully forever. She was starving herself. She's dangerously underweight. That's why her heart is so erratic. She wanted to die. She'd lost everyone she loved. When she made her new will, she said no funeral, no friends. She didn't mention family, but I knew she meant us. I failed her, my own daughter. Lean spoke up. When she first talked to me that Sunday, she thought she knew what had happened but needed proof for us. For us, she only ate with us that Sunday because Audrey insisted, or she wouldn't have eaten at all. The spiked bottle stoppers were to protect herself from what she feared had happened. Why didn't she tell us? It could have changed everything, couldn't it? I was sobbing. I confessed. It's my fault entirely. When I saw Leslie, I assumed she was drunk. Instead of checking on her, I took those damned photos and turned everyone against her for her supposed betrayal. Now I realize I should have done what I never did. As her loving husband, I should have checked on Leslie. I never believed she would cheat on me, so why didn't I check on her? If I had, I would have found her with prohibited substances and things would be so different now. She'll probably hate me forever. We were all consumed by our own pain over our roles in this. Sometime later, we heard Audrey scream. It pierced my heart. It was so raw and primal. No one had noticed her slip away to the annex. I rushed to her. I had never seen anyone so devastated. Tears streamed down her face like a river. She lay curled up on the floor, shaking to her core, holding herself tightly. All she kept crying out was, "Mom," over and over again. The anguish in her voice was palpable. Our GP administered sedatives and scheduled an urgent appointment with a psychiatrist for her. Perhaps the media attention helped expedite the process. I attended these sessions with her since she's only 13. It was heartbreaking to hear her describe how she struggled with the two sides of her mother, Leslie. One was the caring, warm, loving person who told stories, helped with homework, gave advice, and was her friend and confidant. How could these two personas belong to the same person? Her mother wouldn't explain why she acted that way, which left her even more conflicted. Her mother always told the truth, so why withhold it now? Was it because she didn't want to burden them, unable to face telling them? When she saw Leslie helping Lean with the dress, she saw her mother. Who was the real Leslie? When she heard that her mother was willing to die because we had all left her, She broke down. She had gone to the annex because she thought seeing it wouldn't be as traumatic as the images her mind had conjured of the incident. However, the sight of blood splattered everywhere was overwhelming. She realized how close she had come to losing her mother and collapsed. It took several sessions before our Audrey slowly began to recover. She had been so depressed, so withdrawn. At 13, she'd understood much faster than I had that Leslie had only been trying to give us the answer we wanted. She had been prepared to die to give us closure. Her mother loved us all. Audrey now understood that she still loved her mother, and the fear of losing her before she could express it had crushed her. I felt even more despondent. I had failed Leslie and our daughters. I wanted to visit her, but I knew she wouldn't want to see me. Would my presence set her back? Doreen kept me informed. Leon also visited Leslie a few times, and these meetings were very emotional for both of them. The psychiatrist suggested family counseling to help us all rebuild our relationships. Leon and Audrey were enthusiastic about it, but I was hesitant. We had a discussion without the girls present. Eventually, I agreed, though I doubted Leslie would be willing. I knew that if our roles were reversed, I wouldn't. My parents brought me home from the hospital. Mom packed some of my things in the annex and took them to my old room. I was hoping this didn't apply to adult toys. I'd rather my mom didn't know some things about me. She mentioned that she would keep an eye on me to make sure I was eating right. I was a difficult patient in the hospital, but to be honest, calling it food would be a big stretch. I was quite underweight. Once I gain a normal weight, I can think about going back to the annex if I want to. My mom started crying and said, "Leslie, I can't take back those hurtful words that I said to you. I can't forget that I didn't believe you. You've never been dishonest with us, except when it came to your dating relationship with Michael. You've always appreciated honesty. The circumstances do not justify my behavior. I pressured your father and hid my feelings until he changed his mind. I pushed you away when you needed us the most. I know you may never forgive me. I love you." I started crying. I couldn't hold back the tears. I didn't understand why. My mother and I hugged and cried. I cried my eyes out. We've been holding on to each other all this time. When I walked away, I saw that her blouse was translucent. She noticed that I was looking. She waved it off. "One day, your father invited me to participate in a contest in a wet t-shirt. I took second place." She blushed. Dad laughed. "You'd be the last one to come in that bra. You have beautiful dresses that you could wear sometimes." Mom's look silenced him. I wasn't force-fed, but it felt like it. I was tired and lay down to rest on the bed. I was awake and heard my mom talking on the phone, as I assumed, with Michael and the girls. I knew I had to react to Mom's statement somehow, but I didn't know how. What did I want? I really fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of voices drifting from the living room. Heading downstairs, I paused when I spotted Michael and the girls. Just as I was about to retreat, Audrey noticed me and dashed over. She enveloped me in a tight embrace, clinging as if there were no tomorrow. I held her close, tears streaming down my face. Despite my overwhelming happiness, why was I crying? Seeing Audrey in tears too, I tried to console her. "It's okay, Audrey. Everything will be fine." My words only seemed to intensify her emotions. I glanced at the others for support, but they were at a loss for words too. Soon, we found ourselves huddled together on the couch. Leon looked like she wanted to join us, so I opened my other arm, and she nestled in. Tears flowed freely from all of us. I tried to convey my love and reassurance, promising to always be there for them. Audrey finally spoke through her tears. "I love you, Mom. I thought I'd lost you and would never get to say that again. I love you." I completely broke down. I held them both so tightly. I'm sure I hurt them. Tears blurred my vision, and it took a while for the sobbing to subside. In the kitchen, Mom was busy, with Dad and Michael assisting her. Soon, we all gathered around the table for another meal. I stared down at my plate. Mom noticed I wasn't keen on spinach. "Leslie, sometimes there are foods on your plate that you may not like. but they're good for your health. Spinach is rich in iron, especially since your blood count is low. Have you ever had a meal where every bite is scrutinized from plate to mouth? Fine, I'll eat it, but you should eat yours too. After the meal, Lean entertained us with stories from the dance. Her friends had loved her dress and thought her mom and grandma were awesome for helping out. They even used those spiky bottle stoppers, which their parents thought were a great idea. Michael was relieved to see Lean acting like herself. When he glanced my way, I sensed his sadness. We hadn't found a chance to talk privately, despite the psychiatrist's recommendation for counseling. I felt lost for words. I understood that any bond I formed with the girls had to include Michael. I wouldn't exclude him. The next day, just after lunch, Michael showed up. My parents left us alone, indicating it was planned. Michael looked deeply troubled and sorrowful. I feared he was about to forbid the girls and me from being together. I braced myself for bad news. His words and his tone left me stunned. He was clearly devastated. Leslie, I need to apologize for everything I did. I know it can never be enough. Until I saw you on that bed, I never doubted for a moment that you wouldn't cheat on me. If I had taken just a few seconds more to think, to smell, to fully enter the room, I would have realized you were with prohibited substances, not drunk. I would have called the police, and Ryan would be in jail. I hastily jumped to a conclusion that contradicted everything I knew about you. Instead of supporting you, I took pictures of my findings, which I'm ashamed to admit I sent to your parents because I thought they wouldn't believe me. My reaction triggered a chain of events. We cut you off. When the mandatory meetings started affecting the girls, you prioritized them, just like Leslie. Every time we crossed paths, our mutual need for answers fueled our growing anger toward each other. You were upset with me for not trusting that you were unaware, and I was frustrated because you wouldn't confide in me. When David informed me of your actions and the likely personal cost, all to ensure closure for the girls and me, I realized how much I had stripped away from your life, to the point where death seemed preferable to you. I couldn't feel any worse. I was mistaken. David also mentioned there would be no funeral. She has no family or friends. This harsh truth shocked me. I was responsible, but you fought this monster. You weren't like that. You were the woman I married, the one I discarded because I didn't listen to her. I dismissed your integrity without a second thought. You've never lied to me, so why didn't I trust your word? I won't ask for your forgiveness because what I did is unforgivable. I only hope we can rebuild enough of a relationship to support our girls together. They need both of us to guide them. They need you in their lives. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Michael's expression indicated he anticipated a vehement reaction, akin to Leslie's fury. Michael, we can't dwell solely on everything that's happened since that dreadful day. My therapist helped me understand why I acted the way I did afterward, even considering my own end. I found myself caught between two conflicting choices. Why? I didn't know. Without resolving that, there can be no closure for you or for me. Forgiveness. I couldn't forgive myself, so I couldn't expect forgiveness from you or the girls. Michael, forgive yourself. Let's leave the past behind. It's been suggested that we try family counseling, especially seeing how much the girls are struggling. I believe you could benefit from it too. Every night I spend alone, I wished we could be together again. But I now realize that's not possible. We've both changed. What we once had is gone. When Ryan visited me at home, I never imagined I would be here today. I regret to admit I never considered how my death would affect the girls. I want to be there to support and guide them. Our priority is to help them, but I've been advised that I must also take care of my own well-being. The same goes for you. Wherever our journey takes us, whatever direction our relationship evolves in, it must be for genuine reasons, not out of guilt for past events and decisions. Today marks, hopefully, the beginning of a process to build a new relationship. I'd struggled for months with the pain of not understanding why I caused our downfall. The agony of not being believed was even harder. I felt worthless. With support, I hope to rediscover my true self. You've been through something similar. You need to find the Michael everyone loves, not the one consumed by anger. We have a chance to rebuild our relationship. The path forward is uncertain. If we can rediscover our connection in a new way that leads to romance and partnership, it will benefit all of us. Even if we end up as friends, it will be positive for the children. Carrying this burden everywhere won't reignite our love. We all need to confront how these events have affected us emotionally, address our concerns, and work on rebuilding ourselves. We might need counseling together as a couple and individually. It will be a process. I've never cried so much, but the psychiatrist says these are emotions I've held on to tightly. I need to release them. So please don't worry if something you say makes me cry. I might not understand why immediately. If we find ourselves, perhaps we can find each other again. Michael nodded wearily. I agree that therapy is necessary for all of us. There's one thing I can do, and I will do it. I'll make sure everyone knows you didn't cheat on me, and how bravely you fought against that person. You shouldn't be ostracized when you were the one fighting for our marriage. I fled when you needed me the most. I won't forget the past, but I won't dwell on it either. I'll learn from it. I hope we can ultimately reach a good place. We continued our conversation about the girls. I found out that Michael had been dreading the prospect of helping Lean or Audrey shop for underwear. I chuckled at that. He updated me on Audrey's treatment progress. It felt almost like old times, but the warmth wasn't quite there anymore, nor was the fun we used to have sharing stories about them. Would those good times ever return? When he inquired about me, I replied, another time. I still haven't fully processed why I wasn't dead. Michael left after about 40 minutes. I was exhausted. We didn't kiss or embrace. What mattered most was that we hadn't argued. I knew I still needed to talk to my parents and consider starting to rebuild a new relationship with them. Was that even feasible? I understood all of this would be challenging, but there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The journey towards it was just beginning. Did I possess the willpower and strength needed? Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.